Hello students. I wanted to make a brief recording about the rhetorical analysis essay because sometimes that causes students problems. They've never written this kind of essay before, and so a little bit of preliminary information often helps. So this assignment is located in several places, one of which is week 1 in our course under the assignment folder for rhetorical analysis. And if you go in there, there is a lot of textual information about what a rhetorical analysis is. There's also this PDF that I encourage you to look over that I'm not going to read in totality because it's pretty long, but it walks you through some questions to consider in light of your text. So for the rhetorical analysis essay, the basic goal of this assignment, and again, I'm not going to go into every little detail because then this would be a very long video. The basic idea is that you're choosing one of the texts that I've given you here at the bottom, and I've linked several of them here for you. And you are analyzing how persuasive you find this text and why you find it to be either persuasive or not persuasive, or maybe it has both components to it and you want to analyze that. And that's okay. You can have a qualified thesis that says something like, while the author uses ethos really well, I find that there's a lack of logical appeal in the argument, or a lack of statistical data where I would have liked to see more. So the basic components that you're going to be looking at in these texts are ethos, pathos, and logos, although there are other bullet points as well, and a lot of these overlap. So sometimes students get confused when they're trying to organize their essay and they say, well, I think that in this part they're appealing to ethos, they're trying to appear credible, but I also think in this part they're trying to appeal to emotion. Can they be doing both at the same time? Yes, and that's often the case. So your choices become how to organize your essay, how to figure out where you're going to analyze ethos, where you're going to analyze pathos. Should you organize your essay chronologically, where you go through your document from beginning, middle to end and analyze it in that format, or should you group it according to rhetorical appeals, where one section talks about how your author appeals through ethos and another through pathos and logos? Although it's rare to find texts that do not use one of those appeals, I would say that a lot of texts use all three. Realize, please, that a text may rely much more on one rhetorical appeal than the others. So you might have a text that is heavily emotional. And so the majority of your essay might be spent analyzing how the author appeals to the reader's emotions and whether or not you think that is effective. So sometimes when people are trying to persuade and they rely on emotion or they appeal to emotion in their audience, sometimes it's super effective. As much as I hate myself, I find myself being moved almost to tears at any commercial that features a father and daughter because I picture, my own dad, or I picture my husband and my daughter, and it's just, I fall to pieces. It's so effective with me. But there are other commercials, sometimes if they feature during like the Super Bowl or something and they seem over the top masculine or to appeal to machismo or something like that, with cowboys and dads and sons being rough and tough together, and that appeals a lot more to my husband than it does to me. To me, I just feel like, wow, they're just really trying to manipulate men here by showing dads and trying to sell you their Ford F-150. So how effective you think an argument's emotional appeal is really largely dependent on you and your feelings. So there's going to be subjectivity in your analysis. Same thing with credibility. Someone's life experience may be very moving to one person. They may find that it really means that the arguer is credible and experienced in that area, where other people might say, oh, sure, this person has a doctorate in economics, so they seem to know about, getting jobs, but they haven't lived on the streets like this homeless person who really did try to get a job and couldn't find one. So I find their experience more authentic or more moving than the Harvard economist's credentials. So to some degree, again, that is subjective, how persuasive someone's ethos is. So I did want to talk about this a little bit more concretely, and I thought I would rely on looking at Emma Watson's speech in front of the UN and called Gender Equality is Your Issue Too. So, like I said, a lot of these are linked here, and these articles might change. So, I'm making this video in 2017, but often from semester to semester, I change what arguments I give students to choice to analyze. And I tried to include on all of these, if it's a video or a speech, I tried to also include a link to the transcripts so you don't have to, sit there and try to go back and forth listening if you're trying to quote the speech, because you do want to quote the text in your rhetorical analysis. You want to be as specific as possible, especially if you're saying something about the word choice that someone uses being effective. Then you're going to want to quote what they said and then follow it up with your analysis. Or precede it with your analysis, but usually the follow-up is more effective because then your reader knows what you're talking about because you've quoted it. So this is a speech. Emma Watson, for those of you who don't know, she's probably best known for playing Hermione in the Harry Potter series. I'm going to pause her there so she doesn't talk over me. How rude. But she is giving a speech here to the UN, United Nations. And so when we're considering her audience, we want to consider that especially to say, who is her immediate audience? Well, it's these women at the UN, these people at the UN, and particularly these men at the UN, because she does address men specifically in her speech as an audience. But we might also consider that she is Emma Watson, and so she probably has a good idea that this speech is going, and that it's being recorded, and that this speech may go beyond these four walls at the United Nations, that especially if she's got this organization, he for she, she's probably hoping to feature it there. So she's hoping it's going to reach a wider audience than just the UN. I think that would be a safe assumption. So when you're thinking about who her audience is and whether it's effective, you're thinking about her immediate audience, you're thinking about any extended audience she might think about, so you're kind of playing like trying to read her mind. And you're also thinking about yourself as an audience member. What appeals to you, what doesn't appeal to you, and why? So there's a lot of analysis going on here from a lot of different angles. It can get pretty complex. So when you're looking at Emma Watson's speech, first you just want to watch it, I would say, and just absorb it, trying to understand what it is she's saying. And then you're trying to pick out her main argument, her thesis, before you can ever craft yours. So I want to know, what is your arguer arguing? What is their main claim? So there are probably a lot of subclaims in the form of reasons and support, but what is the overarching main point takeaway that they want their audience to go with? And so I am going to give you a little bit of answers, in this video. And one of them, I think, for her speech is this sentence, really, where she narrows down or focuses in on her thesis, is that I believe her point in this speech is that gender equality is not just for women, that it's for men too, because they need gender equality, but also because women will not achieve gender equality, according to Emma Watson, until men do as well. And again, that might be somewhere you would analyze logos or logic. Do you believe that? Do men have to be, where does she say it? Do men have to feel free from stereotypes and oppression, and that they can be vulnerable and they don't have to they can show their feelings and they can do all these things? Do they have to achieve that kind of gender equality in order for women to do that? Because I'm not sure I believe that is true. I think that you can have women becoming equal without trying to repair any damage that has been done to gender equality for men. That doesn't mean, I do believe, and again, this would go into your logos, I'm speaking subjectively here from my perspective, but that I do agree with her logically that there are stereotypes that are placed on men and that they are unfair, and that there is gender inequality even for men. But so that could be part of the logos you analyze. One of the places where you would want to look at ethos is she qualified to speak on this issue? She talks a lot about her own experience as a woman, and she also gives a lot of statistics. I wouldn't say a lot, but for a short speech that's primarily personally narrated and built on her own experience, she does give some statistics throughout. So do you think she's credible to speak on this issue? She even admits at one point, I'm trying to scroll down, I hope I'm not making you dizzy as you're following along with this video here. Down here, let's see. You might be thinking, who is this Harry Potter girl and what is she doing up on stage at the UN? It's a good question, and trust me, I have been asking myself the same thing. I don't know if I am qualified to be here. All I know is that I care about this problem and I want to make it better. And so she goes on to say why she feels driven to speak up about this issue. So if you're analyzing her ethos, that would be the same question that I would ask you is she qualified to be there? Is she a good spokesperson for this particular topic, for this subject matter? And the same thing, no matter what you are analyzing, no matter which text, if it's, let's go back to our list here, if it's Donald Trump talking to the Boy Scouts, or Simon Sinek talking about millennials, or Martin Luther King talking about civil rights. I mean, are these people qualified? And in some cases, you may not know who they are. So Simon Sinek or David Bry or Ken Robinson, and you may have to Google them and do some research. And that's where the research component comes in is, what do you know about these people? What more do you want to know that may affect how persuasive you find them? So that's my as brief of an overview as I can do without getting too long-winded about what a rhetorical analysis is. It's your argument about how persuasive or not the text is, the argument that you're analyzing. And so you're going to put forth, yes, it's very persuasive, no, it's not. There are parts that are, parts that aren't, and then you're going to break it down for me. You're going to include summaries, paraphrases, and direct quotations from your text to support your idea that it is or is not persuasive, and focus on key parts, hopefully not the whole speech or text, otherwise this would be a very long essay, but key parts where you feel like here is where this author succeeds, here is where this author falls short, or, here is where things get muddled for this author, that kind of thing. And I'm using the term author for any arguer here, whether it's a speech maker or a writer. And the only other thing I want you to be careful of, there are two things that happen to students in this essay sometimes, and it's one of the reasons I require a rough draft for this essay is so I can catch everybody before we get to the final draft. And that is students either spend way too much time summarizing their text and not analyzing it. That's a big thing they do. So they just put the Emma Watson speech in their own words and retell it to me. And then the other thing they often tend to do is they tend to argue the speech alongside the speech or text. So they'll include summary, and then instead of analyzing this person argued this well, they use ethos here, this is how they use the emotional appeal, they try to appeal to the audience's sense of fairness, and it's really effective because everyone has been a daughter or a son before, and so when she uses that, it really hits home for the audience. So that's analysis, but arguing would be something like, Emma Watson is totally right, and we need to make sure gender equality is there for all, and men need to work alongside women, not just women working to be feminists, but everyone should be a feminist. So if you go off on that tangent, which I can be in danger of myself because I get all fired up, then you are not analyzing, you are arguing, which there will be time for that. You will have 2 assignments like that later on in the semester where you will be arguing your own topics, whatever you choose. And maybe it will be Emma Watson's topic about whether men should be more involved in feminism. Anyway, I'm going to try and stop talking, otherwise I know this video will be super long, but hopefully this gives you a brief overview in addition to the PDF and in addition to any other resources I've given you about what a rhetorical analysis is. I will also include some sample rhetorical analysis so you can look at those, and please reach out to me if you have any questions.